Do people judge you by the clothes you wear? Do they see it as a measure of your moral character? If you're a woman, the answer is yes. And sadly, Classically Abby has this right. If you watched Classically Abby's video, Why You Should Dress Modestly, that's basically what she's getting at. Your image projects who you are. And if you don't dress modestly, people will draw all kinds of conclusions about the kind of woman you are. Now, for those that don't know Classically Abby, she describes herself as a conservative influencer. Her video on dressing modestly, when I last checked, had around 800,000 views. She defines modesty as dressing in a way that doesn't sexualize your body. Now, let me just confirm that I find many of her views problematic, but the reality is a lot of them are accurate based on the kind of society that we're living in. This whole thing really goes way beyond Abby. She's really a reflection of this ongoing battle to manage women's sexuality. And in fact, many of the people that are the strongest advocates of this desire to kind of enforce these rules about modesty and appropriateness are actually other women. But before we jump in, let's really unpack Abby's video. She describes modesty as dressing beautifully and attractively, but not garishly. The word garish is a really interesting one. It's defined as tastelessly showish. The word taste or tasteless has really strong class connotations, but there's also some moral elements in there too. Good taste is considered to be, what's aesthetically pleasing, fashionable, polite, or socially appropriate. And being polite is essentially being respectful and considerate of other people. So practicing good taste is about being polite and following the rules of society. So if you're not polite, that might indicate you've had the wrong kind of upbringing, you don't know how to carry yourself, and you don't know how to be respectful. So that's a real moral sense that women that aren't following these rules are breaking some kind of moral code. Abby really reinforces this moral idea by saying that women that don't dress modestly aren't being fair. She gives the example of a woman in the park. She says, if you go to the park and you're surrounded by families, is it fair to dress in a way that's distracting? Now, this really implies that women that are attractive and distracting are jeopardizing families with children in some way. And again, the use of the word fair indicates these women are breaking some kind of moral code and actually affecting communities and families, because families are often seen as the core of a community. In all political posters and banners and statements, families are really seen as central. So these women are undermining families. They're almost morally dangerous people. According to Abby as well, these women should remember that men aren't really responsible for sexualizing women. She actually says that men are visual creatures, not emotional ones. So from what I've seen, no one is really just one thing. I'm also fairly confident that men experience emotions and relate to other people on an emotional level. According to Abby, it's women who should account for men's natural inclinations to be visual, and it's women that really need to adjust their outfits to account for that if they want to be taken seriously. Now, as others pointed out, it is possible to be sexually attracted to someone and find them interesting at the same time. But Abby isn't the only person to hold these kind of views. They're all over the internet. A quick search on Google and you'll find heaps of tips on how to look sexy but classy. And there's, for a lot of the articles, there is that strong moral element coming through. So an example would be the article I found called 5 Rules for Dressing Sexy and Classy in the Office. And it said, ladies, it's about getting the balance just right so people can see you but don't jump to conclusions. Therefore, it's better to go long and safe than short and get a bad reputation. So again, we're seeing that if you don't follow these moral codes about dressing in the right kind of way, you invite judgment from other people. And the judgment is a negative one. You're a morally bad person. You are, sexually promiscuous. There's all these kind of judgments that get wrapped up in your clothing. So why has clothing become a measure of moral character? What's the reason behind these kinds of articles, and why does Abby hold the views that she has? Well, for one, she is really reinforcing an idea of what's considered socially appropriate. Back in the 1890s, showing your ankles was considered risque. Today, wearing miniskirts in most offices are considered inappropriate, and there are dress codes to formally enforce that judgment. There's a video that's called How Not to Look Slutty in a Miniskirt that's up on YouTube, and that's had 500,000 views. What's the point of all this content? Well, one, it's trying to guide women to avoid breaking these moral codes, but also kind of sanction them. If you break these rules, these are the consequences you can expect to face. I firsthand have experienced this kind of sanctioning. It's done through office dress codes, it's through snide remarks, snarky side stares. So in my experience, women are often the most aggressive protectors of these moral codes and enforcers of the rules, so to speak. Now, one reason for these moral codes might be to help ensure you don't stand out too much to men. The research shows that this might be an area that we should look into. For example, the study showed that women that are too beautiful are seen as less trustworthy and less truthful. And in fact, there's a little bit of a anxiety around both sexes that beautiful women use their looks to manipulate others. And for women, the fear of the use of attractiveness has historically been a way to attract a man, to secure them, and through them get economic mobility. So what does this all mean? Well, ultimately, the story is a lot more complex than what you would think. Abby says that her interest is ensuring that you as a woman are taken for who you are rather than what you look like. But the reality might be, if you buy the evolutionary argument, is that, if a woman's too distracting in the park, it will distract someone's man from her. And then that man will leave her, thereby taking the economic and social support that comes with him. Now, again, you might say, well, that's sexist. Not everyone needs a man. Not all women are even interested in men, I should say. But I should say that I think that there is a huge shame culture around sexuality, and there's a lot of moral judgments when it comes to clothing. Who's to blame for this? Who's driving this? Is it other women? Do men benefit from this system? I'd love to know your thoughts. And what are your experiences in terms of being shamed or being sanctioned? Share them in the comments because I'd love to know more. Well, over to you, everyone.